The air was thick with tension in the Galactic Council chamber, a place where deals had been struck, alliances forged, and peace brokered across the stars. Yet today, the atmosphere was different. The walls, usually adorned with holographic projections of unity, now seemed to close in, oppressive and heavy. President Clara Voss stood at the center of it all, her gaze unwavering as she addressed the council for what could very well be the last time. For centuries, humanity has been patient, Voss began, her voice steady but sharp, each word deliberate. We've played by your rules. We've compromised, we've negotiated, and we've given you every opportunity to treat us as equals. But this ends today. A murmur ran through the council, an uneasy ripple of whispers passing from delegate to delegate. Most had hoped that the situation with the Vorvins, the ruthless alien empire now threatening Earth's colonies, could be resolved diplomatically. But President Voss knew, that the time for talks had long since passed. The Vorvins had been given every chance to back down, and yet, here they were, demanding humanity's submission. Voss took a step forward, her boots clicking on the polished floor, a sound that echoed across the silent chamber. The Vorvins have declared war. They've sent their fleets to our borders and slaughtered our colonies. And you want to sit here and debate? Her voice rose, an edge of steel in her tone. You want more time? More talks? More appeasement? Well, I've had enough. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some of them old enough to remember the scars of galactic wars, their faces weary with the weight of their positions. But none of them had felt the full force of what Earth was capable of. None of them had witnessed humanity's rise from a fledgling species, barely out of its home system, to a formidable presence in the stars. I'm not here for another round of meaningless negotiations, Voss continued, her eyes locking onto the projection of the Vorvin fleet, now visible over her shoulder. The alien ships were massive, their cold, angular silhouettes a symbol of a civilization that valued power above all else. I'm here to make one thing clear. If the Vorvins want war, they will get war. And this time, the galaxy will remember who we are. The room went silent. Delegates, once confident in their belief that they could control the situation, exchanged glances. There were murmurs, but no one dared speak out against the human president. Earth had become a force to be reckoned with. The decision that lay ahead wasn't just about the fate of Earth. It was about the balance of power across the entire galaxy. Enough talking, Voss said, her voice cold, precise. Let's start the war. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown to the stars themselves. A few moments passed, but to those in the room, it felt like an eternity. This was the moment when diplomacy ended, and the true nature of humanity began to reveal itself. President Voss, an aging delegate from the Zorith system, finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. You can't be serious. The Vorvins are the mightiest force in the galaxy. If you engage them, it will mean the end of everything we've worked for. Voss's gaze turned sharp, piercing through the council. If we don't fight, it will be the end of everything we are. Another council member, a representative from the Spherit system, a species known for their calm and logical approach, leaned forward. This is reckless, President Voss. We need a strategy. We need to fight. Voss cut in, her voice louder now, resonating through the chamber. Every strategy has been exhausted. We've given them time. We've given you time. And now, it's time to show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of. She turned to the holographic image of the Vorvin fleet once again, her face hardening. The moment you believed humanity could be broken, the moment you believed we would bend to your will, was the moment you sealed your fate. With one final glance at the council, Voss turned and strode toward the doors. Her team was waiting, the military leaders who had stood by her side since the beginning. Outside, the warships were preparing for their maiden voyage. Today, humanity would show the galaxy that they were no longer the weaklings at the table. As the doors closed behind her, the council was left in stunned silence. The age of diplomacy was over. The war for Earth's future had begun. The moment the broadcast ended, silence fell over the entire planet. It wasn't just the words of President Clara Voss that sent shockwaves through Earth. It was the gravity of them. The declaration was more than just a promise of war. It was a proclamation that humanity would no longer be silent in the face of the galaxy's most ruthless empire. The Vorvins had miscalculated, and now the fate of Earth hung on the edge of a blade. General Maria Cortez stood in the briefing room, the heavy silence of the military command center pressing in around her. Her hands rested on the cold, smooth surface of the command table, eyes fixed on the holographic map in front of her. The blueprints of Earth's military assets flashed, highlighting the ships, weapons, and troops that would soon make their mark on history. It wasn't the first time Cortez had seen the reports, nor the first time she had prepared for battle. But this was different. The sheer magnitude of the coming conflict was unlike anything humanity had faced. The Vorvins were known for their ruthless tactics, their technologically advanced fleets, and their empire built on the bones of conquered civilizations. No one, not even Earth's best generals, had truly believed humanity could stand against them. Until now. General Cortez, you're needed in the command center. A voice cut through the quiet hum of the room. Cortez turned, her sharp gaze falling on her second-in-command, Lieutenant Jackson. He was young, eager, and full of conviction, but Cortez had seen enough battles to know that a man's convictions could be shattered by the cruelty of war. "Let's go," she said quietly, motioning for him to lead the way. She followed him down the narrow hallway, her mind already racing through tactical possibilities. Every plan, every maneuver, had to be perfect. Lives, countless lives, were about to hang in the balance. As they entered the command center, the vast expanse of the room opened before her. Officers were stationed at terminals, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of data feeds and mission reports. Cortez's gaze immediately found Admiral Jonathan Hayes, who stood with his arms crossed, watching the incoming intel stream across the central display. "Admiral," Cortez greeted, her voice firm. "General." Hayes nodded, his eyes betraying nothing of the tension that had been building for days. "We've got our orders. The first strike begins in 12 hours. Are we ready?" Cortez studied the map again, her mind analyzing the layout of Earth's forces. The humans had come a long way in a short time, their technology rapidly advancing thanks to their relentless determination and the ingenuity of their scientists. It wasn't just their military assets that made them formidable. It was their strategy, their adaptability. "Everything is in place. We've got the new warships online, the elite units prepped, and the supply line secured. But we need to be careful. The Vorvins are going to hit back hard. We can't afford to make a mistake." Hayes grunted, his eyes narrowing. "They don't expect us to hit them first. We're going to catch them off guard. The element of surprise is our best weapon. And it's not going to last long," Cortez replied, a dark edge to her tone. "The Vorvins are brutal and efficient. If we give them an opening, they'll exploit it without hesitation. We can't underestimate them." A sudden shift in the atmosphere brought Cortez's attention to the large screen in front of her. The familiar face of President Voss appeared, her stern expression a silent reminder of what was at stake. "General Cortez, Admiral Hayes," Voss began, her voice echoing through the room. "The time for hesitation has passed. Earth is under threat, and we will not back down. Prepare your forces. You will engage the Vorvins with everything we have. Victory is our only option." Her words hit harder than any weapon. There was no room for failure, no time for second guesses. It wasn't just the future of Earth that was at stake. The entire galaxy would be watching, waiting to see if humanity would survive or be crushed under the might of 1,000 alien fleets. Voss's image disappeared from the screen, replaced by a series of tactical overlays and fleet movements. Cortez looked at the map once more, her mind calculating their next moves. The Vorvins would expect a frontal assault, but that was predictable. No, the human forces had something else in mind, something bolder, more daring. "Lieutenant Jackson," she said, her voice cool and decisive. "Get me the fleet commanders. It's time to finalize our strategy." Jackson didn't hesitate. "On it, General." As the command center buzzed with activity, Cortez allowed herself a brief moment to think. In the past, she had been able to compartmentalize the weight of war. She could separate the mission from the emotional toll. But now, as she looked out at the faces of the men and women who had sworn to fight by her side, she knew this would be a different kind of war. This wasn't just about tactical superiority or the might of the fleet. This was about survival. "General," Hayes said, stepping up to her side, "we've got one shot at this. If we fail, it's not just Earth that falls. It's every colony, every alliance we've fought to build." Cortez looked at the holographic map one last time. She didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. "We won't fail," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "This is humanity's fight, and we're not backing down." With that, Cortez turned her attention to the plan ahead. The ships were ready, the soldiers prepared. The war had begun. The first blast of human firepower shattered the silence of the cosmos. Admiral Jonathan Hayes watched the destruction unfold on the holographic display. The human fleet, sleek and deadly, advanced toward the Vorvan forces. The battle had begun. As the new warships unleashed their full might, the stars seemed to dim, the sheer force of their weapons pushing the darkness back with each pulse of energy. For years, humanity had been dismissed as weak, a fledgling species playing in a galaxy full of giants. No longer. The ships under Hayes's command were a testament to human ingenuity, built in secrecy, designed to take on the best the galaxy had to offer, and armed with weapons that could level entire fleets. "Admiral, we've got them on the run." Lieutenant Jackson's voice crackled over the comms. Hayes didn't take his eyes off the battle, his hands steady on the controls. "We're just getting started," Hayes replied, his voice calm, even though every fiber of his being screamed with the adrenaline of war. The Vorvans might have had numbers on their side, but humanity had something far more valuable: innovation, adaptability, and a ruthlessness born from centuries of survival against the odds. The first of the human warships, the Defiant, fired a concentrated energy beam that split the hull of a Vorvan destroyer like paper. The Vorvans, caught off guard by the sudden, overwhelming assault, scrambled to retaliate, but their ships were slower, less agile. The human fleet moved with precision, dancing through the void like a deadly ballet, each move calculated, each strike deliberate. "Enemy forces retreating," Jackson reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. "They're scrambling to regroup." Hayes' lips twisted into a grim smile. The Vorvans were underestimating the human ability to strike fast, strike hard. But Hayes knew this was only the beginning. The Vorvans were not easily beaten, and humanity's forces were still untested on the largest stage of war the galaxy had ever seen. "We'll follow through," Hayes commanded. "We push them back and hit their supply lines. We're not giving them room to breathe." The fleet surged forward, the warship's weapon systems firing in perfect synchronization. The alien ships, now outnumbered and disorganized, faltered, struggling to bring their heavier weaponry to bear. But Hayes wasn't fooled. The Vorvans were known for their ability to regroup and strike with overwhelming force when they least expected it. This wasn't the end. It was only the start of something much larger. As the battle raged, General Maria Cortez watched from her command center on Earth. The success of the first assault had given humanity a glimmer of hope, but Cortez knew the war was far from over. Her eyes were drawn to the incoming transmissions from the front lines, updates, reports, strategies. She'd seen the videos of the first wave of destruction, the power of humanity's new ships in action. But there was no room for celebration. There were bigger battles ahead and much larger risks. "Cortez, we've intercepted a transmission from the Vorvan High Command." A voice broke through her thoughts. She glanced at the officer who had spoken, her expression steely. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing a Vorvan commander. His face, a blend of reptilian and insectoid features, twisted in a sneer. "You think this victory means something, humans," the Vorvan sneered. "You've only provoked the wrath of an empire you can't begin to comprehend." Cortez's lips tightened. She had been expecting this. The Vorvans weren't going to retreat quietly. Their response was coming, and it would be brutal. "We've only just begun, Commander," Cortez said, her voice low, but filled with resolve. "You'll learn soon enough what happens when you underestimate humanity." The screen went black, and Cortez's hand clenched into a fist. Her mind raced, formulating the next set of moves. The Vorvins were a powerful force, but they had no idea what they were up against. "We're not stopping until they're wiped from existence," she muttered under her breath. And she meant it. Humanity had something the Vorvins didn't: an unbreakable will to survive, and the determination to protect everything they held dear. As the human fleet continued its advance, Hayes stood at the helm, watching as the battle unfolded. The next few hours would decide much, but he was sure of one thing: humanity had just taken its first step into the galaxy's brutal heart, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Vorvins had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were about to feel the full force of it. General Maria Cortez stood at the front of the operations room, watching as the human fleet pushed deeper into Vorvin space. The war, once a distant fear, was now a harsh reality, but humanity was not retreating. Not anymore. The victory from the first strike had sent a ripple of confidence through Earth's forces, and the Vorvins were beginning to realize just how costly their mistake had been. "General, we're getting reports from front." Lieutenant Jackson's voice broke through Cortez's thoughts, his tone sharp. "The Vorvins are trying to regroup. They're bringing in reinforcements from the outer colonies. We need to hit them fast." Cortez turned to face the map that loomed on the screen. The Vorvins, their forces scattered, were attempting to consolidate their positions. Their command was fractured, a dangerous sign that their confidence in their superiority was beginning to falter. "We strike now, before they have a chance to stabilize," Cortez ordered. "Coordinate with the fleet. I want every ship moving toward their supply lines. Cut them off completely. Leave them with no choice but to fight on our terms." The room hummed with activity as officers scrambled to implement the orders. Cortez didn't need to watch the screen. She knew what was coming. This was the turning point, the moment when the balance of the war could tip in humanity's favor. Meanwhile, Admiral Hayes was on board the Defiant, overseeing the human fleet's advance. The battle had already cost them more lives than he was willing to count, but the results spoke for themselves. The Vorvins were losing ground. The first wave had broken their defenses, and now they were reeling from a series of tactical strikes that had disrupted their supply chains. The Vorvins couldn't afford to lose their logistics. It was their lifeblood. And that was exactly what humanity was targeting. "Admiral, we've received confirmation," a communications officer reported. "The Vorvins have begun to pull back, but they're shifting to a defensive stance around their core worlds. They're preparing for a final stand." Hayes gritted his teeth. The Vorvins had underestimated humanity's ability to strike quickly and decisively, but they were still a force to be reckoned with. "We'll hit them where it hurts," Hayes said, voice steady but firm. "Give them a show of force they won't forget." He turned to the map, the coordinates locked in. It was a dangerous gamble. Press the attack too far, and the human fleet could be overextended. But the enemy was weak. Now was the time to press the advantage. Prepare the second wave. I want their homeworlds burning by the end of the day. Back on Earth, President Claravas watched the reports come in, her face a mask of cold calculation. The war was far from over, and the victories they had achieved so far had come at a high cost. Lives lost, ships destroyed, resources stretched to the limit. But there was no turning back now. She had been prepared for a long, drawn-out conflict. What she hadn't expected was humanity's sudden and brutal efficiency in warfare. The new warships, a culmination of human ingenuity and years of secret development, had proven far more capable than anyone had dared hope. They were quick, precise, and devastating. Voss took a deep breath, watching as the last of the reports filtered in. The momentum had shifted. The Vorvins were no longer the overwhelming force they once were. They were reeling. And while there was still much to be done, Earth was now in a position to dictate the terms of the war. "General Cortez," she said, speaking into the comms, "keep up the pressure. We're in this together, and we will win this war." "Understood, Madam President." Cortez's voice came through, steady and resolute. "We'll finish what we started." The war had begun as a struggle for survival, but it was quickly becoming a crusade. Humanity was fighting for more than just its survival. It was fighting for its place in the galaxy. And the Vorvans were learning, in real time, that humanity would not be the easy target they had assumed. Cortez surveyed the battlefield from the war room, her mind running through every possible outcome. She had been in enough wars to know that the tides could shift quickly. The Vorvans, though shaken, were still dangerous. They had a devastating weapon, the Omega Beam, a weapon capable of destroying entire planets. And they weren't afraid to use it. "General, we've intercepted Vorvan communications," Lieutenant Jackson reported. "They're activating the Omega Beam, targeting the Defiant." Cortez's heart skipped a beat. The Omega Beam was a game changer. If the Vorvans fired it, they would wipe out the flagship and the fleet with it. She couldn't let that happen. "Prepare countermeasures," Cortez snapped. "All units, evasive maneuvers. We can't let them get the shot off." The human fleet immediately shifted into defensive formations, moving with unparalleled coordination. Cortez's mind raced, calculating every angle, every possible escape. The Omega Beam was lethal, but it had a weakness. Its range was limited. If they could get close enough, they might be able to destroy it before it fired. "Admiral," Cortez's voice crackled over the comms. "We're going in. We need to destroy that Omega Beam before it fires." "Understood, General," Hayes responded, his voice tight with determination. "We'll follow your lead." The battle had only just begun, but humanity had found its strength. And it was no longer just about survival. It was about winning. The Omega Beam was moments away from firing. General Maria Cortez's eyes locked onto the tactical map as her heart raced. The Vorvans were relentless, and the terrifying weapon they had unleashed was now targeted directly at Earth's fleet. If it fired, the Defiant, along with the entire human armada, would be annihilated in an instant. There was no room for error, no time for hesitation. "Admiral Hayes," Cortez barked, her voice steady despite the tension. "I need that weapon neutralized now." The calmness in Hayes's voice belied the chaos of the situation. "We're moving in, General. We'll be within range in 5 minutes. We can't afford to miss." The countdown to destruction echoed in Cortez's mind as she tracked the enemy's movements. The Omega Beam's energy buildup was undeniable. Every sensor on her ship screamed in warning. If they didn't act now, it would be too late. "Lieutenant Jackson," Cortez snapped, her eyes glued to the holographic display. "Prepare the squadron for evasive action. We're going straight for the Omega Beam." The command center buzzed with activity as officers sprang into action, coordinating the fleet's maneuvers. Cortez stood firm, her mind processing the movements, calculating trajectories with surgical precision. They were running out of time. The Vorvans had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. The first wave of attacks had broken their front lines, but now the true test was at hand. The Vorvans had pushed humanity into a corner, thinking it would break them. But instead, it had hardened them. Now, Earth's forces weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to dominate. "Target locked," Lieutenant Jackson reported, his voice tight with focus. "We're in position." Cortez exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. "Fire." A blast of energy tore through the space between the human fleet and the Omega Beam's platform, and the world around them seemed to slow. The sound of weapons discharging was drowned out by the roaring anticipation of the final strike. The human fleet, moving with unmatched precision, unloaded everything they had into the enemy's weapon. The Omega Beam trembled. Another shot. And then, with a deafening explosion, the beam's energy core detonated, sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. The Vorvans, stunned by the sudden loss of their most powerful weapon, scrambled to recover. But it was too late. "We've done it," Lieutenant Jackson breathed, his voice filled with awe. The victory was bittersweet. Cortez's eyes scanned the battlefield. There was still chaos, still the smell of death in the air. But for the first time since the war began, she allowed herself a fleeting moment of satisfaction. The tides had shifted. The Vorvins had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. "Move forward," Cortez ordered, her voice resolute. "We take their homeworld next." Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Clara Voss sat in the war room, watching the reports as they came in. She had seen her people rise to the occasion, but she had never truly understood the depth of their strength until now. Humanity was no longer a fledgling species. They were a force to be reckoned with. She had expected a long, bloody war. She had expected to lose more than she could bear. But as the tide began to turn in humanity's favor, she realized something else. This was no longer about survival. This was about dominance. This was humanity's moment. The Vorvins had their own power, their own brutal might, but they lacked the one thing humanity possessed in abundance: willpower. The human drive to survive, to adapt, to overcome, had proven unstoppable. And as President Voss stood at the edge of the galaxy's future, she knew that the worst was behind them. But the war was far from over. The human fleet advanced, their warships now a symbol of humanity's strength. The Vorvins, reeling from the loss of the Omega Beam and the constant pressure from Earth's forces, began to retreat, their command structure in disarray. The once mighty empire had faltered, and humanity was ready to take full advantage. Cortez, watching the fallout unfold, knew one thing for certain. They had proven that they could fight. Now, it was time to prove they could win. Earth was on the brink of changing the galaxy forever, and there would be no going back. "Keep pushing," Cortez muttered to herself as she surveyed the battlefield. "They're not done yet, but neither are we." As the fleet charged forward, humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever. The Vorvins had made a fatal mistake in underestimating them, and now humanity would make them regret it. The Vorvin homeworld loomed on the horizon, its dark surface marred by the scars of war. For years, this planet had been the heart of an empire that had crushed countless civilizations. But today it would be the site of its downfall. General Maria Cortez stood at the helm of the human fleet, her eyes fixed on the looming planet ahead. This was it, the final push. There would be no more negotiations, no more attempts at diplomacy. The Vorvins had forced humanity's hand, and now they would face the consequences. The war had started on their terms, but it would end on humanity's. "Admiral Hayes, what's the status?" Cortez asked, her voice steady despite the tension that gripped her. "All fleets in position, General," Hayes replied. "We've got one shot at this. The Vorvins will throw everything they have at us, but we've come too far to stop now." Cortez nodded, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. There was no turning back. The final assault was underway, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Humanity had already lost too much, but today they would gain everything, or lose it all. The Vorvins had a final weapon in reserve, a last-ditch defense, known as the Wraith Protocol. An ancient relic of their civilization, it was capable of draining the life force of entire fleets and rendering them useless in seconds. If the Vorvins used it, humanity's fleet would be crippled. But Cortez wasn't about to let that happen. "Lieutenant Jackson, get me a status update on the Wraith Protocol," she ordered. Jackson's voice crackled over the comms. "It's active, General. The Vorvins have begun charging the weapon. We have about 5 minutes before it reaches full capacity." Cortez cursed under her breath. "I won't let them use it. Deploy the assault teams to their launch sites. If we can't disable the Wraith Protocol, we'll destroy it." The fleet surged forward, a deadly wave of ships cutting through the void. The final battle for the Vorvin homeworld had begun. "General, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorvin High Command," a communications officer reported. Cortez's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The screen flickered, revealing the stern face of Emperor Zorith, his reptilian eyes glinting with cold malice. "You think you can defeat us, humans? We are the mightiest empire the galaxy has ever known. You are nothing." Cortez's lips curled into a faint smile. "You were once the mightiest, but not anymore." With a swift motion, she cut the transmission. No more words were needed. The time for talking was over. The battle erupted in full force. Energy blasts lit up the dark expanse of space as human warships and Vorvan destroyers clashed in a deadly dance. The Wraith protocol hummed with power, but humanity was not afraid. They were ready. "General, the Wraith protocol is fully charged," Jackson warned, his voice tight with urgency. Cortez clenched her fists. "We've got one shot at this. Take it down." The fleet moved in, all systems firing at once, focusing their fire on the Wraith protocol's core. The Vorvans fought back with desperation, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. A final volley of energy blasts struck the core, and with a brilliant explosion, the Wraith protocol was no more. The Vorvans, now vulnerable, fell into disarray. The final battle was over. As the dust settled, Cortez stood at the front of the command room, looking out over the wreckage. The galaxy had just witnessed humanity's power and its resolve. "We've won," she said quietly, her voice filled with both relief and resolve. "The Vorvans are finished." And with that, the war was over. Humanity had not only survived, it had conquered.